This is a review of the Panasonic 14-140mm zoom. It's what's known as a super zoom, and it has such a wide range of focal lengths, from wide angle to telephoto, that in principle it might be the only lens you ever need. Unfortunately, real life isn't like that, and in order to pack focal lengths from 14 to 140 into one lens, some compromises have to be made. In 35mm terms, this is a 28-280mm lens. Given that when I was a news photographer I carried 3 Nikon bodies round my neck with 28, 85 and 180mm lenses, and that this one lens covers a wider range than that and on one camera body, some compromise does seem reasonable. The main compromise, compared to a fixed focal length, is in lens speed. At the wide end it is f4, perfectly reasonable, but gradually tapers down to a rather slow f5.8, a bit more than a stop slower. I actually tend to use it at f8 because that's where its best overall performance seems to be, across the frame width and across the focal length range. Let's take a look. On picking up this lens, the first thing that hits you is that it feels solid and quite heavy. There's a metal lens mount and the focus and zoom ring are silky smooth. It's the sort of lens you like to hold and use, it feels good in the hands. Apart from the focus ring at the front and the wider zoom ring behind it, the only other control is the grandly named Mega OIS, that's Panasonic's image stabilization system. When you focus, the front lens element doesn't rotate, which is handy if you use polarizing filters. It may not rotate, but it certainly trombones. From a lens that fits on the palm of your hand zoomed in, it turns into a mini monster zoomed out to 140mm. Of course, when you carry it, you keep it at the 40mm setting. It stays there too, even when dangled vertically. Like all Panasonic stabilised lenses, it rattles if you shake it. It's a bit off-putting, but perfectly normal. I mentioned the tromboning. At 14mm, this lens measures 84mm, or rather less than 3.5 inches long. It extends to 150mm, or about 6 inches, not that it matters in use. It weighs in at a solid 460 grams, or 1 pound weight. It comes with a neat pouch for storage, front and rear caps, and a very smart and efficient lens hood. Are you listening, Olympus? Here's the size compared to the 12-35mm f2.8 Panasonic. And here to the 14-42 compact Panasonic zoom. If you put it on one of the smaller GF Panasonics or an Olympus pen body, it looks a bit of a case of the tail wagging the dog, but it handles just fine with one hand cradling the lens in your open palm and the other lightly supporting the camera body. And a big plus for those of us who do a lot of video, a lens like this means you can shoot long sequences without ever needing to change lenses. Zoom into that shiny guitar or the harp player at a gig, and out to the entire band. Here's the zoom range in action. Impressive, huh? And in movie, switch on the extended telezoom and you have a 700mm zoom equivalent, with little quality loss in normal light conditions. Here's a crow filmed using the ETZ. And here it is on the wide angle 14mm setting without ETZ. This is a one lens, it's ridiculous. Now the nitty-gritty, performance. For stills use, we have to accept that this lens is a compromise. Sharpness is good at 14mm and best in the mid-range. It definitely deteriorates a bit as the focal length increases, but nowhere near a point where it is anything less than sharp, and that you might hesitate to use it. I think the contrast seems to lessen too at the long end. Another compromise, because of the aperture, is that you cannot achieve extreme shallow depth of field effects. Nevertheless, this peak is at 75mm and f5.6, so such effects are not entirely out of reach. As I said earlier, I tend to set the lens to f8 on aperture priority setting. At that aperture, centre and edge sharpness through the range is at its best, and I use the lens knowing that no picture I take will disappoint in terms of crispness. I happily use it at wider apertures too, since in real-world photography edge sharpness rarely matters. But one of the penalties of a wide range like this is across-the-frame performance. I would respectfully suggest that if your interest is in photographing brick walls head-on in dim light, this is not your lens. Which brings me to distortion, often a problem with a wide-ranging zoom like this. It is corrected in camera, so not really noticeable. Even so, it is not the first lens you would pick up for critical architectural photography, especially at the wide-angle end. There is some purple fringing, but on Panasonic cameras this is mostly taken out automatically. On Olympus cameras it isn't, but is easily removed manually if it bothers you. While this lens isn't a macro by any means, it does focus good and close, especially at the 140mm end. In fact, probably close enough for most general purpose photography outside of your actual macro. Autofocus speed doesn't seem hampered by the relative slowness of the lens. It's quick to lock on wherever it is in the zoom range, and small changes of distance are near instantaneous. All in all, the focusing on this lens is very impressive. So, let's sum up a bit. If you're a pixel peeper, or shallow depth of field fetishist, this is not the lens for you. If what you're looking for is an all-round good performer for when you're out and about, check out this lens. An observation I would make is that it seems to me to perform better than the general run of standard kit zooms, though not as well as the 12-35 f2.8. Provided the physical size doesn't daunt you, it will do most of what you need. It focuses close but is not a macro. It will supply shallow depth of field but not extremely shallow depth of field. It is sharp but not the sharpest. It is not small, but it is smaller than the several lenses that you would need to replace it. Nor is it cheap, but it is probably cheaper than the several lenses you would need to cover its ground. It is a compromise, that is the nature of a lens like this. Should you buy one? Do you need one? Yes and no. I use this lens when I'm going out for a cycle ride or strolling around a city with friends. It does everything satisfactorily. If I'm going out expressly to take pictures, no, I take my ultra-wide zoom, my faster aperture, more restricted range zooms, my wide aperture primes. This lens is the little black dress of photography. It is rarely perfect for the occasion, but it is never inappropriate. It is the ultimate travel lens for M43 users. The funny thing is, when I go through my pictures on Lightroom, this is the one lens I've used more than any other single one. Why? Because it's my favourite lens? No, because it's the one I take when I can't think of which lenses to take. Compromise, see? Thanks for watching.